Well, hello and welcome back to UP Power. Kevin McNulty and Keegan Cooper with you as we are ready to go here. Fall sports are here. We had girls tennis in action yesterday in high school sports. And, well, we're going to start today talking a little college sports because we got a preseason poll for GLIAC women's soccer today, Keegan. And no surprise for the NMU Wildcats, of course, regular season and tournament champions in the GLIAC a year ago. They're picked number 1. The surprise, though, comes from Houghton. Michigan Tech picked 6th, an NCAA tournament team from a year ago. I know they had a coaching change. Turk Ozturk no longer the head man in Houghton. It's Melissa Kuhar, her first season as a D2 head coach. But still, I don't think they're the 6th best team in the conference, in my opinion.
Yeah, you know, and again, it's a poll's a poll, but I agree with you. I don't think that Michigan Tech
and it is a
6th.
Coach's poll again.
It is a coach's poll, yeah. So I don't think they fall at 6th. I think they're more probably in the realm of a 3-4 team when you look at the GLIAC, at least from my analysis. So interesting to see that. And I know we were talking about, you know, their schedule last year. You know, unfortunately, GLIAC tournament, when you get down to that.
That was a tough one, the loss to Parkside in their first game in the GLIAC tournament. But I'm thinking about a year ago, ranked teams. Grand Valley State, really good. You know, if they were picked ahead of the Huskies, I certainly understand that. They had a 3-game stretch to start October a year ago. Grand Valley State was ranked 13th. They lost that one 2-0, fair and square. They tie Northern Michigan in a rivalry game Friday night in Houghton. That was a thrilling game. It was sleeting a little bit as winter started to roll in. So they tie with the Wildcats. And then Grand Valley State, now ranked 9th, October 13th, a weekend later, they tie with the Lakers. So they were hanging out with some of the best teams in the country a year ago. And I know they do have some different pieces. And as I mentioned, a different coach. I just don't think this is a team that should be picked 6th in the conference, but then again, that's where they are, and you know, a little chip on their shoulder heading into this season. I'll read the full poll as we get ready for GLIAC women's soccer. It is almost here. The Huskies are scrimmaging Lewis tomorrow, 2 exhibitions before they really get going. So Northern Michigan, 62 votes, number 1. Then it's Grand Valley State, understandable. 3rd, Saginaw Valley State, 47 votes. Ferris State in 4th with 45 votes, and that's where I think the Huskies should have been hanging out. But instead, Parkside, 32 votes at number 5, 31 right behind them, Michigan Tech, and then bringing up the rear, Davenport, Purdue Northwest, and Roosevelt, the 9th team in the conference. So you have an uneven number of teams in women's soccer, which kind of stinks, and, well, these other teams must be pretty thrilled that Roosevelt's joining the conference because they're picked last in all of our polls so far.
Yeah. So, hey, you're not last. You know,
that was the thing with NMU football. Winless season a year ago, you would think automatically you're going to be last. Nope. Roosevelt comes in, saves the day. You're picked 7th. But that's where they are. Let's talk a little bit about NMU women's soccer. We don't have a men's soccer poll. We can touch on them a little bit because you talked to Alex Fadovich last weekend. But John Sandoval and the Wildcats, they bring a ton of talent back, notably Molly Pistorius, the pride of Park Ridge, Illinois. Out there again, the GLIAC Conference Player of the Year, Division II All-American. I mean, she was just fantastic a year ago. And then you think about Maria Storm and Brooke Pietola, part of that, you know, Heartland, Brighton area outside Detroit, where John Sandoval has been recruiting very, very well. Even when I was down at MSU for the baseball state championship that Norway was playing in, the girls soccer state championships were going on at the same time. Heartland, Brighton were there. Our friend Dave Ellis was calling those matches, a few of them coming up to join the Wildcats in the future. So things are really looking up in Marquette for this program. We know what the next step is for them.
Yeah.
Getting past Maryville, and going deep in the tournament.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's no surprise to see them number 1. I think when you look at it and what they bring back and what they did last year, not only winning the GLIAC regular season, but kind of, you know, working their way through the GLIAC tournament and then getting into the NCAA tournament. It is, right? Now they've had the opportunity to host some NCAA tournament games. They know what that's like that team has been able to experience that. So now it's getting over that next hump. It's winning the GLIAC regular season, winning the GLIAC tournament, and getting into the NCAA tournament and making a run because they have the talent and the ability to do so.
I'd be shocked if they aren't in the NCAA tournament once again this season. And frankly, I'd be surprised if they don't win either the conference tournament or the conference regular season. Why not both yet again? I mentioned what they bring back. The standard with that program is to be the best in the conference, and that's why they were picked #1. So really, really excited for them to get going. Let's take a look at NMU's soccer schedule as we head in to the regular season. There'll also be scrimmaging Lewis this weekend, then they have an exhibition against St. Norbert before things really get going with Minnesota Duluth on the road September 5th. That's a little road trip to start the year. Kind of like that, although I think it's a good idea to play a lot of games in Marquette while the weather is still in your favor, although they are going to Minnesota to start the year, Duluth and then St. Cloud on Saturday the 7th. They don't open at home until September 20th, so it's a while until they're back, and that's the start of the GLIAC season. Grand Valley State, that's a big game right off the bat. I kind of like that too, that they can prove themselves right away. Of course, it's the first conference game. There's not a lot lying on the line, but at the same time, the Wildcats can prove themselves right away, beat the Lakers. Really good team.
Yeah, I mean, we look at Grand Valley State, they're right there up in the polls, so that is kind of almost, I would say, a statement game.
And we saw them competing in the Marquette Regional in the NCAA tournament a year ago, too.
So I think it's a statement game for the Wildcats of starting conference play, we're at home, we have to come out and let everybody know that the coaches poll and what we did last year is correct, right? You know, we were top dogs for a reason, and kind of show that. And the level of competition they're going to see from Grand Valley State is going to be up there too, right? Everybody's gunning for the Wildcats this year, right? It's not a
that is true. There's a target on their back, for sure.
Is, yeah, which I think adds pressure. You know, it adds pressure to go out and perform and play in these big moments. But they have the ability to do it. You know.
At the same time, I think they're such a loose group.
Yeah.
They have a lot of fun, and Sandy does a great job, you know, creating that culture, bringing the right girls in out of high school, and they all want to stay. You don't see, you know, many players transferring out of that program. Of course, it's a little more rare in D2 than it is in D1 these days. But at the same time, you know, all these players want to be there, play for Sandoval. Obviously, when he made the transition from the men's game to the women's game, he proved himself to just be a great soccer coach, and that's what he's been doing. Let's talk about NMU men's soccer, because last year was disappointing, because over and over again, it was like, gosh, they're so close, and that's the way it goes in soccer sometimes when you just can't scratch one across, and oop, Golazo, you win one, you lose one, 1-0. And that was kind of the story of the NMU men's soccer team a year ago. You've talked to Alex Vodovich recently. You know, how does he feel going into this season? I know he made some changes with his roster to make sure that he has the right guys that want to win and want to compete at NMU. What do you expect? How do they come out of the gates this year?
Yeah, you know, I think he feels good. And, right, sometimes you have to make those changes. You know, he's brought in some guys. Some guys have stepped away, and I think they have to come out of the gates full of energy, 100%. And, you know, last year when we look at those games that they lost 1-0 or 2-1 or, you know, these one-goal games, they had opportunities to tie.
That's why it was frustrating
and had
watching.
Opportunities to win.
Gosh.
They got to finish those chances. So I think it is, you know, 150% coming out of the gate. We need everything you got for both halves of the game, and they have to find opportunities to score early, and when they get those opportunities, they have to capitalize on them.
And I think defend home turf as well. Their conference record a year ago, 1-6-3. That one win came in their first GLIAC game.
Yeah.
So they had to be feeling good, and I don't want to say the wheels came off, because that's not how it went. They weren't losing games and 4-0 or anything like that. It was just a constant, we can't get there. And offensively, they didn't have an answer. They didn't have a Molly Pistorius or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that in 2024 they can have an answer offensively that, you know, they can be in control in some of these games like you mentioned.
Yeah, because, you know, some people are like, oh, it's a defensive breakdown. Well, no. When you look at the goals allowed, they didn't really ever allow. I mean, if we look at their schedule, they didn't really ever allow too many goals. It was
rarely there was a 3-goal game from their opponent.
Yeah,
you know?
It was a 1-0 loss or a 2-1 or a 2-0. So it's not a defensive question. It's a how do we find those opportunities, which they come in soccer. You get them. It just happens. But how do we finish? How do we capitalize? How do we find goals, right? You know, is it, you know, do we try to draw penalties in the box so we get, you know, PKs, or what are we doing? But they've got to, this year, I think defensively they'll still be solid, but offensively, not that they have to press and be impatient, but at the same time, you know, it's like with any sport. When you're playing with a lead, it's a lot more comfortable than playing from behind.
That's exactly right.
And I think for the Wildcats, especially for the men's team, if they can play with or play from ahead, you know, don't play from behind. You know, get down 1 goal, okay. But it's when you get down 2 and then you struggle to find 1 or find an equalizer. You need to play from ahead.
That's what I think about baseball. When you're not scoring in the first couple innings, when you know have your first 5 batters up, and you know the other team is able to capitalize on having the meat of their order up in the first couple of innings, well, they're in better position to win the game. For the NMU men's soccer team, 3 exhibition games on their schedule, August 23rd and then 2 on August 27th. They also open up the season on the road, Northwood and Quincy, before coming home to Marquette September 12th to open the season. 2 non-conference games, Lewis and Thomas More, before the GLIAC season gets underway with St. Cloud State, which of course is in the GLIAC for men's soccer. Let's touch on volleyball a little bit because we're getting close there, and I expect some preseason polls, if not this week, then next week for sure. We're used to having a little tournament in Marquette to get the season underway. Now, that was not scheduled this year because Vandeman Arena was under construction. I think that was a contingency plan if anything went wrong there. So we have to wait a little bit for NMU and Tech to come home to play volleyball. And let's start with NMU. I think Loescher's team was a little bit down last year, but I think, you know, you and I both have a lot of respect for him and what he does with that team. You know, I think they have the chance to have a really good season in the GLIAC and compete for a conference championship for sure. And you look at it, they start at Minnesota State in Mankato with the tournament September 6th through the 7th. So that's a Friday and Saturday before the UP Open, not till September 12th and 13th. The team's coming up for that. Tech is not in it. Findlay, Minnesota Duluth, and St. Cloud State. So that will be our first look at the newly renovated Vandeman Arena. You and I have both been in there recently. It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. I'm excited for both volleyball and men's and women's basketball to have their kind of their own place. This is their place.
Well, especially for the basketball programs. Obviously, volleyball was playing in Vandeman for forever. Yeah. They just get a nice little upgrade, especially for baskall. Not having to share the Barry. Of course, they didn't have to practice in the Barry, but it's a little bit nicer and just not have to logistically, think about turning over the ice for basketball, especially when, hopefully maybe NMU's hosting the GLIAC tournament again in men's basketball. Maybe they're hosting it in women's basketball as well. We don't know, but that's not going to be an issue. That would be at Vandeman Arena. I'm just really, really, really looking forward to seeing it in action, seeing it packed, because it will be packed. It's a smaller venue. I think about 2,000 less seats approximately than the Barry, which at times the basketball teams could fill that place pretty well. But when you think about playing in Vandeman, they have bleachers on all 4 sides, 2 beautiful video boards. I think the environment's going to be great in there.
Yeah, I think it heightens it. It makes it now feel like, a
real D2 basketball
environment. Yeah, a real D2 arena. It heightens it, and I think it will just add to the volleyball matches now, having bleachers on 4 sides. Those 2 big, video boards. I think that environment will be heightened too. So I'm excited for all those teams to kind of have that space and get in there. Obviously, we know, they had to play in, a little different scenario where basketball was playing some of their games last year. So to have, hey, we know we're playing here. We don't have to worry about, splitting the barrier or things like that, or the turnover, or when can we get in there. They have that place, and that's theirs, and it should be exciting.
Like I said, September 12th, NMU Volleyball will open up Vandermint Arena, the newly renovated Vandermint Arena. That's one other thing I wanted to add. I was talking to Matt Mackersack about this, and he really said it feels like a great D2 gym. And I'm like, you've been to a lot more D2 basketball arenas than I have, but I say it all the time, even on the D1 level, where I went to school at Maryland, the arena is 18,000 seats. It's basically an NBA arena, so it's hard to fill for non-conference certainly. So they sell it out for half the conference games, and it's great then. But those games where you're not selling it out, it just feels like there's not a ton of life in there. And if you shrink a lot of those even D1 arenas down, Baylor just did this. They moved into a brand new, beautiful space. Now the camera angle was an issue last year, if you remember that at all, when they opened it up, I think in January. That was really strange, but it looks awesome. And what did they do? They just shrunk it down, so they're going to pack it for every game. And I think that's what we're going to get with Vandermint. Let's touch on Tech Volleyball. Another team I think will take a step up from last year, just based on what Matt Jennings has done during his time at Tech. He's actually the longest tenured head coach that's part of our rivalry series. He's been there the whole time. We've been doing it all 10 years at Tech. So Matt Jennings and the Huskies will open their season September 6th in Golden, Colorado. It's kind of a fun trip to take to start your season. They will play 4 matches there, and then they are hosting the Up North tournament that same weekend, September 13th, or I guess Tech and NMU are both hosting it. So Duluth, Findlay, St. Cloud State, but Tech and Northern won't play each other. They will save that for us to put on TV6 and Fox UP. So I think it's a nice little preseason. Of course, they have the Midwest crossover in the middle of their season. I like that too, having a little bit of a break. Kind of an in-season tournament, if you will. But that comes smack dab in the middle of the GLIAC season. And yeah, after the Up North tournament, is finished in Houghton and Marquette, it's GLIAC season for those teams.
Kind of a nice kickoff to volleyball season, and then you get into GLIACs, and then I think the Midwest crossover will be a nice break of GLIAC play, and you can kind of.
I like how it works. I like the volleyball schedule, maybe more than any other sport that we cover, just because you get home and away with every team in the conference. You have the break in the middle. You have these fun little tournaments, because it's volleyball. You can't play more than one match in a day. Not a ton of wear and tear. And it'll be fun to cover. I think both these teams, like I mentioned, in my opinion, should take a step up.
Yeah, and both of them have returners that will be key players for both the Wildcats and the Huskies. And it's, you'll bring in new people, and new gals to play. But, it's almost like you can't say that they're not going to have a step up from the last season. When we just look at who Michigan Tech and who Northern Michigan will bring back and who they'll have, it's exciting, Where do you think they'll land at in the GLIAC poll?
Trying to think about last year, when you're throwing out the teams that were really solid. Of course, Ferris and Grand Valley are already up there pretty much every season. I think they're hanging around the middle of the pack, which is acceptable for both. Tech will have to replaced Lindy Jury, their #1 hitter from a year ago. Now NMU, Jackie Smith, going to be ready to go. Excited to watch her. Hopefully she's healthy this season. That was an issue for them last year. Another thing with both of these teams, if they stay healthy, they're in a lot better shape to have solid seasons. Yeah. That's a big thing, especially with NMU and Jackie Smith.
Yeah, I mean, she was when she played, she was a dominant threat out there. Almost every time the ball came over.
And there were times last season where you could tell she wasn't 100%, and it kind of stunk, to watch the Wildcats, try and work around her not being, all in and 100% healthy. You don't want to see that again.
No.
So if they are healthy, I think both of these teams, like I mentioned, can have solid seasons, get back to the NCAA tournament. Obviously, I think that's a goal for each of them year in and year out. We will, I think, talk more football next week because we will be in week one, week 0, I suppose. August 29th is when both NMU and Tech will open up their football schedules. Tech on the road at Bemidji and NMU at home hosting Duluth. Of course, that night, we also have a ton of high school football. That's why we get a bonus Friday Night Fever on a Thursday. Let's talk a little high school football because, like I mentioned, we'll talk NMU and Tech football. Next week, we'll get out to one of their practices as well early next week. So, high school football, you were at Kingsford today.
Yeah.
What's the vibe around the Flivers?
Yeah, I mean, they're ready. I mean, when you think it's you can't slide it under the rug. Eli Rouse, gone. Noah Johnson, gone.
Yeah. Those are big losses.
Those are big losses.
Yeah.
They are. So what I actually have their roster right here from last year.
But like Iron Mountain, another Dickinson County team, they have their quarterback back.
They do, yeah.
So I think that's big. When you're talking Iron Mountain, you lose Matthew Kolovecki, you lose Luke Wolf, but Ian Martela will be back behind center. So that's some continuity you have on offense. Same deal with the Flivers. You lose Cardell Morton, you lose Eli Rouse, but you have Nick Navarro back at quarterback.
Yeah, and you have, when I look at their roster, they had a lot of juniors last year, so they have a bulk senior class this year. And, talking to Coach Navarro, guys that have been in big games, guys that are seasoned, guys that have, been through in and out the program, for the last couple of years that are now, experienced. And so I don't think Kingsford is going to have too much trouble adjusting to not having Eli Rouse on the offensive side. I think that they're going to be just fine. You look at some of their receivers too. I think you got to throw out Gavin Grondin. I know we talked about him for basketball season.
He's just a pure athlete,
He's a pure athlete,
I said to you, I kind of forgot he played football because he's just such a good basketball player.
Exactly, and so a lot of these guys, I just look at the returners, and it's like these guys have been here now for, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and talking to Coach Navarro, they start in January lifting, and they're going through all this stuff, and they're working in the off season to prepare for this. They're excited. I think they're hungry. When I of all the teams I've talked to, I think Kingsford is they're on the hunt. They're hungry. They want to be successful. They want to get into the postseason, and they want to make a run. And I think that they can. Now, where Coach Navarro says to get there, execution every day, every week, every play, every snap, you have to execute, right? Tackling.
They did a lot of executing last year, and I mean that's what you hear when you're talking UP football, blocking and tackling, man. And I know a lot of these coaches now in the preseason are preaching that as the #1 thing you got to do, because if you don't do that, you're going to have some trouble. And that leads me to a big point, I guess, storyline that I heard at Menominee practice on Friday. And I don't know how we didn't acknowledge this a year ago. They had 3 losses, 2 in the regular season, and then, of course, the state championship game at Ford Field. Yeah. All 3 of their losses came against teams with all-state running backs. Negaunee and Kyla Carr, Kingsford,
Eli Rouse,
and then Lumen Christi. And I don't know why I'm forgetting that guy's name.
Yeah.
Because he was a dog.
He was a dog.
In the second and third quarter, we thought the game was over because he was running all over them. Credit to Menominee. They came back and had a chance to win it. But yeah, a year ago, that was their kryptonite. Teams with really, really strong running games were able to knock off the Maroons. And, well, they want to improve in that department.
Yeah.
They're pretty big up front. Chad Brandt mentioned their offensive line. Most of them were starting last year, playing in those big-time games at Ford Field, protecting Trevor Turkoff and Landon Bardowski. Of course, with Menominee's offense, blocking downfield for Trevor Turkoff and Landon Bardowski. I think Menominee will be just fine without those guys. Obviously, incredible playmakers, two guys that are moving on to play college football. But Tanner Turkoff will be taking the snaps. Chad Brandt also mentioned he might be popping outside at times to catch a pass or two. We know he's pretty darn good at that. Evident by the 70-yard touchdown he caught from his brother in the state championship game. Just such a cool moment a year ago. But like I said, I think Menominee will be just fine. It'll look a little bit different. Another thing Coach Brandt said to me, we'll spread the ball around a little bit more because we don't have Turkoff and Bardowski, but we do have another Turkoff and another Bardowski. So they'll be carrying the ball a little bit. I think Menominee's a really solid team once again. And you think about, these teams that play in the Westpac, the Kingsford, the Iron Mountains, the Negaunee, the Menominees. It's going to be a battle. Throw Gladstone in there. Obviously, they had a really good year last year as well. So thinking about, those teams going up against each other in 11-man, they will have some battles. Back to Kingsford for a second, just to look at, their record a year ago. God, they played Negaunee so early. That was, their one loss during the regular season, 13-12.
Yeah.
Low-scoring affair. Kyla Carr and Eli Rouse duking it out. So that was their loss during the regular season. I think the tough thing for Kingsford, I don't know for sure. They were in D5 a year ago. I think they're back in D5 once again. They win the 2 playoff games, then they have to go downstate and play Frankenmuth, and I don't think they had the bodies to compete with that team. So when you get into the postseason, I think all that offseason work, lifting, getting stronger, getting bigger, blocking and tackling is what will win them games in the postseason.
Yeah, and I think the year of, another year of experience, right? And they know what it's like to play a team from downstate. They know what it's like to play Frankenmuth. Lo and behold, they might end up playing them in the postseason again. They know what to expect, I think, on a higher level, so they'll be more prepared when they get to that point, But yeah, when you look at the Westpac teams, all of those games, when those teams match up, it is going to be a dogfight for 4 quarters. And it's going to be, like Coach Navarro said, it will be down the stretch who executes the best, who is able to score a touchdown, scratch across a couple points, kick the extra point, kick a field goal, maybe run a 2-point conversion. Who's going to be able to execute those things down the stretch, right? They're all going to block and tackle and run the ball, and they have, quarterbacks with some pretty good arms that can throw it, but it's who executes the little things down the stretch that I think will be interesting to see. I agree with you. I don't think Menominee is going to have any trouble this year. I don't think that Kingsford will. When you look at it, what's crazy to me
Will these teams drop 1 or 2 games in the regular season? Probably.
Yeah.
Because these were battles a year ago, like I mentioned. Menominee, Negaunee, Kingsford, just kind of beating each other up. Note for you, Cadell Williams, Lumen Christi running back.
Cadell Williams,
moving on to play at Central Michigan. So Dason Smith of Marquette might be blocking for him, ironically, but he was incredible in the state championship and probably the reason Lumen Christi came out on top of that one. Team I just mentioned, Marquette, on Kingsford's schedule at the end of the year. I have pretty high hopes for Marquette. They were 5-3 in the regular season a year ago. They made the playoffs and lost to Petoskey. Kind of a bummer of a game because that was a team they beat during the regular season. A comeback victory. Ford Richardson's first time coming into the game at quarterback.
Yeah.
As a sophomore, he was outstanding, and, well, he'll be back this year.
Yeah.
And he'll be better. He's bigger, has experience. I asked Ford, about that experience last year and what he learned from it. He said just getting those reps and learning from some of the older guys, because, like I said, he's a sophomore. So he had a lot to learn. It was his first year in Marquette. Obviously, he's the son of Shane Richardson, so when he took the job at NMU, brought the whole family up from North Carolina, so it was his first year playing high school football in the UP. So a lot of things for a young kid to figure out. I thought he did an exceptional job toward the tail end of last season. But the thing about Marquette, and when you just think about raw numbers, they have a lot of guys.
Yeah.
They got a lot of big guys.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be huge for them to use that to their advantage. You think about Ford Richardson and the things he can do when he has great protection. We talked about this with Ethan a little bit last week. Talon Smith, who's going to play at Central Michigan next year, and then Pavel McCutcheon is a huge dude, will be on the line as well.
Yeah.
So I have high hopes for Marquette. Obviously, they get a tough deal when they go into the state playoffs because they're so high up in the divisions, but I think they're a really solid team, and we will get to see them against some of these UP teams, Gladstone, Escanaba, and Kingsford.
Yeah,
so 3 UP teams on the schedule. I think Marquette competes for sure this year.
No, and I think that they should. And for Ford, especially, getting that experience as a sophomore, now coming back for your junior season, you're just, I think, for him, a little bit of the nerves now will be gone.
Yeah.
Because there's not so much pressure as being a sophomore and you're put in as a starting quarterback and you've got your hand.
The other thing that I found out talking to Ford Richardson is he never played quarterback as a kid. Youth football all the way through 8th grade, never played quarterback. And he mentioned his freshman year, he tried it out when he was in high school in North Carolina. So that's a big deal too. This is only his 3rd season playing the position. You expect him to just be that much better, in my opinion. I think.
Yeah, and I think he will excel this season after having that experience. And you saw him come in big moments and come through, and make some great passes, make some great runs. So it'll be exciting to see what Marquette does. We'll see a lot of them on Saturday.
Yeah.
They do play some, throughout the year, but I expect them to be up there this year.
And the other thing, you got a guy named Jacob McPhee who's 6'6" that can catch passes.
Yeah.
So when in doubt, Ford, you can probably throw it up.
Yeah.
To the big redhead, and he'll catch it. Yeah. Obviously, another guy we talk about being great on the basketball court because of his height. Well, pretty darn good at catching passes because of his height as well. Let's talk a little 8-player. We got our first look at an 8-player team yesterday. Lakeland and Hubble, went to the state semifinals last season. They had a great year, knocking off North Central 2 times.
Yeah.
And Lakeland, and obviously their quarterback, Danny Marcotte, gone. Gabe Popko, Tech football recruit, is playing at Tech this fall, so he's gone too. It's a little bit of a different look, but they think they can still compete with North Central and Norway, the teams of the like, an 8-player.
Yeah, and talking to Coach Brad Gervais, physicality, especially in 8-man, they have to be, physical, and they have to be, in better shape than the team they're playing against, right? So, they were, when I was out at the practice, they were not only working on skills and plays and things like that, but also conditioning their bodies. You're going through football season, and it is a rigorous sport, and it's going to take a lot out of you. So, who is going to not be tired in the 4th quarter? Right? Who's going to have the energy to finish out the game? I think that they are also a hungry team, right? You make it to the state semis, you're so close to competing for a state championship, and it was kind of just out of reach for them. So, they're hungry. They want to get back there, but they want to go farther, and they have to do that by, blocking and tackling and being physical and being the team that's in better shape. They look good. Obviously, they'll have some new guys in at new positions, so that'll be something to learn offensively. They do have some returners back on the defensive side and a couple on the offensive side too. so it's not going to be a completely whole new scheme. So it'll be interesting. I think the big thing for them, Lakeland and Hubble elevated themselves in that kind of top-tier echelon of 8-player football teams, especially after knocking off North Central in the regular season.
Right.
Then seeing them in the playoffs, because when you think about North Central, 3-time back-to-back, state championship teams, North Central is going to be hungry this year, right? They're going to want to get back.
Yeah.
So they're going to be a team to watch.
We hope to get a look at them early next week, them in Norway. Some of the top 8-player programs that we've seen over the last couple of years. I'm going to make a statement and say we will have a UP team win an 8-player state title this year. I don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
Those are my 3 candidates right now as this computer shuts down for no reason, which is fun. Because I wanted to look at the Packers box score from Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, that's my bold statement that a UP team will once again raise a state championship trophy in 8-player football at the Superior Dome.
Yeah,
this fall.
I could see it.
So
it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible.
Let's transition to the NFL. Lions and Packers preseason almost wrapped up. Saturday, both of them will be out on the field at 1 o'clock Eastern time, so that will do it eventually. But Packers on Sunday, it's the preseason. You don't have to get worried.
31 players didn't play. Jordan Love didn't
Bo
play.
Nix, MVP for the Broncos. He looked really good. And you're talking, obviously when you're talking about the preseason, everyone wants to know how the rookie quarterbacks are doing. Bo Nix is certainly a part of that because he's in a competition. Unlike Jaden Daniels was just named the starter in Washington, Caleb Williams has been the starter since before the Bears drafted him in Chicago. So that preseason game on Sunday, 27-2, the Packers lose. Nothing to freak out over. Like you said, Jordan Love didn't play, and a lot of the defensive starters didn't play.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get into these joint practices. When you are on the practice field with these teams, doing some, intensive game-like stuff. I'll get a look at it on Thursday when the Ravens are in Green Bay for a joint practice, Thursday and Friday before the preseason. So you might not see a lot of Packers starters this weekend either.
Yeah, you might not see. Maybe you see Jordan Love for a drive or maybe 2
I'm
drives.
over the preseason at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
I am looking forward to going to Green Bay on Thursday and getting a look at a joint practice and how those work. Obviously, Baltimore, a really good team, a good team for the Packers to bring in for a joint practice. Consider, I think this season, tell me if I'm wrong, the teams that played in the championship games a year ago are the top 4 teams again going into this season.
You're right. Yeah.
Talking about Kansas City, Baltimore, Detroit, and San Francisco.
Yeah. No, those are the top 4 teams. Yeah.
Packers bringing Baltimore in. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, the MVP last season. That'll be cool, but I don't know if we should expect the Packers starters to be out there on Saturday.
No.
But, and then about 2 weeks before they're playing in Brazil. So they're going to get ready for that as well. The Lions now, again, just the preseason, but a last-second field goal is still pretty thrilling. That was my big takeaway. I think the Lions have a kicker.
The Lions have
Jake
a kicker,
Bates. Yeah. That was huge. I mean, it doesn't matter that it's preseason.
Yeah.
The clock is expiring. You got to come out there, 40-plus yard field goal, and knock it down. And he did. I think that's encouraging, especially the bad news. The Lions got the first week of training camp that Michael Badgley is going to be out for the year.
Yeah.
So you could have had a situation where you don't have a kicker at all, but it looks like Dan Campbell and the Lions are going to be all right, even though Dan Campbell might not use him at all.
Yeah, fair.
But
Dan Campbell is a 4th down man, but in those situations, you have
at the end of the game, exactly.
You have a kicker. You have that opportunity in those situations where
also makes the decisions far easier. Yeah. If you know you're inside the 30 and your kicker's going to knock it down, you're more likely to kick the field goal if it's not maybe 4th and 2, 4th and 1.
But the field goal to win it, if it's you know, it's preseason, so you can't really write it up as, oh, the Lions are going to beat, you know, are better than
they did beat the Chiefs a year ago at Arrowhead. I was a little surprised this was on the preseason schedule because of that. I don't really know how they do the preseason schedule. That's the way it shook out. Jared Goff not out there again. A lot of the guys you'll see during the regular season on the Lions offense, I think maybe the best offense in football. They were not out there. Yeah. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs still nursing that hamstring injury. Best not to have him try and go in a preseason game. I don't think he'll go on Saturday against the Steelers either. It's another situation with the Lions going up against the Steelers, just like the Packers going up against the Broncos. They have a quarterback competition. And, you know, it's obviously drawing a lot of media coverage between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who's going to suit up for them. That preseason game means so much more to the Steelers than it does for the Lions.
Well, and I think I have a love-hate relationship with the preseason for the NFL, right? It's great because you get a look at, you know, some of the new guys coming in, the rookies. If there is battles for a position, you get a look at that.
Yeah.
On the flip side, from a fan perspective, you kind of worry about your team when you don't, you know, you don't see the normal, you know, starters out there, and you're like, oh my gosh. You know, we lost 37-3.
Well, it's the game we've been playing over the past 5-10 years where no one plays in the preseason, so it's like rest versus rust. You know, if Jared Goff doesn't have a good game week 1, certain Lion fans will be like, well, it's because he didn't play in the preseason. But then during the preseason, you're like, why are we going to send our 30-year-old quarterback who we just paid $50 million out there in the preseason?
Yeah. And
so know, I get both sides.
And some of these guys out there for the preseason are trying to make the roster.
Yeah.
You know, they're fighting not only for a starting job, but they're fighting for a job. They're fighting for a spot on the roster. And I know that will be a big thing here.
The roster almost gets cut in half about a week from now.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, you know, I like it and I don't like it. And that's how it will always be. Right? There are a lot of benefits to the preseason and the NFL, especially when you get into these competitions, right? Because to me, you can have those competitions in practice, but to put it in a game format, in a game scenario, and put those guys out
the lights are on, the fans are there. Yeah.
Then you see how they really, really perform, right? Now, you can't create the high-pressure situations and see how quarterbacks do, but it's still a game-like format. And the joint practices are great, too, and you can get that kind of game-like format because you're not playing against your guys, but still, the preseason games are great for those competitions, for rookies, for guys that are competing for the 53-man roster, for a spot on the 53-man roster. For your starters, right? You know, Jordan Love's played, what, one drive in the preseason so far? The first drive.
Yeah, I believe so, and he threw the 65-yard touchdown to Wicks. Yeah.
He doesn't need to play anymore, right? Now, like you said.
It's another guy they just paid. I think Jordan Love's a little bit different than Jared Goff, though, because Jordan Love only started one season.
Yeah.
And you just paid him that money. I understand you just paid him that money. You don't want him to get hurt in the preseason, but how often does that happen?
Fair.
Yeah. I'm very curious, and I'll try and find out on Thursday if we know if Jordan Love and a lot of those guys on offense and defense, some of the veterans on defense, if they will go in the preseason finale against the Ravens. Because at the same time, you have those 2 weeks between your season opener and the preseason game. If they're not in game-like scenarios for that long, the rust conversation comes in.
Yeah,
these guys are going to be rusted. They're going to be jet-lagged maybe.
They're going to come out flat.
Going to Sao Paulo, Brazil. I guess I don't know what the time difference is. That was ignorant of me. I don't know if there is jet lag when you fly to Brazil. But
there's got to be a time difference.
There's probably a difference, but it can't be huge, right?
I don't know.
It's not like you're flying to Japan. Anyway, we'll do our research on that.
Yeah. But no, I agree with that. It's, you know, if you don't come out, especially if you're a quarterback, especially if you've just been paid fat stacks of money, giant bags of money.
Yeah, legitimately.
Week one, you have to come out and perform. And I guess from my perspective, I would maybe not play the first week of preseason, maybe not the second, but definitely I'm playing.
You want to build up.
Yeah.
That's what I always say.
I'm definitely playing at least one of those weeks because if you just now, obviously they're professional athletes. They're not just going to go sit on the couch for the next 2 weeks. But
No.
you're not going to be in game-like scenarios for the next 2 weeks, and then you're playing in Brazil. You know, this football game might be one of the most watched football games for the regular season.
Yeah.
You don't wanna come out
Everyone's
flat.
already got Peacock from the Olympics, so that won't be an issue.
So it won't be an issue.
We should note that Eagles, Packers, Week 1, exclusively on Peacock. You cannot watch it on linear television. There were games like this last year on Amazon and Peacock, but you can't watch the Packers on regular TV. You got to stream it on Peacock. So we're getting out ahead of that.
Yep.
We will mention that when we talk Packers
Yeah.
going forward. But back to the preseason conversation. Guess who played in that game against the Lions on Saturday? Guess who threw a behind-the-back pass to
No.
Travis Kelce
The king.
on Saturday?
when can
He's
we
so
start-
cocky.
when-
He's so cocky now. What are we doing?
He's so good.
I know.
He's so good.
And he
When-
completed it. That
when
was one of
can-
it. He threw 14 passes. He was 8 for 14.
When do we
So
start calling him?
the best player on the planet, at least best quarterback on the planet, is playing in the preseason.
Yeah,
They've won back-to-back Super Bowls. So there's a conversation to be had there. That's Andy Reid's philosophy, and I think Mahomes likes it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the starting quarterback, he is the leader. He's the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I don't think there's a question about that. You should be out there. Maybe not for the whole game, but you should be out there.
I would like to see Jared Goff out there on Saturday.
I would like to see Jared Goff. I'd like to see Jordan Love out there. Anybody else, offense, defense,
I
whatever.
agree, because when you think about that 2-week layoff, it's a lot of time to
Yeah.
not be in a game-like scenario. You're supposed to be building up to the regular season, not just, sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
Not that they do that, like you said. They're practicing every day. But it's the game-like scenarios, and I know Jared Goff's been doing it for 10 years or so, but still, at the same time.
Those are my hot takes.
You're a football player. Play football.
Yeah, I need to see the quarterbacks, right? Because if they come out cold week 1, Jordan Love or
Like
Jared
I
Goff,
said, people are going to be saying,
yeah,
it's because you didn't play in the
the
preseason.
comment section will be going insane.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Not that NFL teams listen to the comment section, but it's just it's going to be thrown out there
Yeah.
if they don't perform well in week 1. Well, we are looking forward to it. Like I mentioned, Thursday I will be at Packers-Ravens joint practice in Green Bay, live in your TV6 First Look and early news. We'll have the story of the day with the joint practice. The Baltimore Ravens, really good team, coming into Green Bay ahead of their preseason game on Saturday. So I'll be back next week. You're taking Tuesday off, so you can be here on Thursday for our first Friday Night Fever of the 2024
Thursday, yeah.
football season. Friday Night Fever on a Thursday. I like that. But it'll be cool. So I'll be back next week to chat with you. We'll have a guest, TBD, who that will be. But looking forward to getting 1 week closer to football. And next Thursday we hit the ground running. So thanks for joining us on this edition of UP Power, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or watching us live on our TV6 live stream. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you next time.